Hey there, welcome to the Going Scared podcast. I'm Jessica Honegger, founder of the world-changing brand Noonday Collection, and our Going Scared community gathers here every week for direct and honest conversations that help you live a life of courage by leaving comfort and going scared. All right, I feel like doing the general right now. We are down to number 2 in our top 10 listener favorites, and I'm super excited that it is Tiffany Aliche. Tiffany Aliche is also known as the Budgetnista, and she is a financial educator and best-selling author who's helped over 1 million women worldwide achieve financial freedom. And oh my gosh, y'all, I met Tiffany speaking at an event at the Texas Women's Conference, and we were sitting by each other signing books, and we just really hit it off. And I'm so glad I've gotten to know her. My family and I talk about Tiffany's book and this podcast episode in particular on the regular. In fact, right now, Joe and I, okay, this is TMI. There was another podcast episode that we did on the show that talked about financial, like just get the hell out of debt. And she recommended on that episode that when you're talking budgets with your partner to do it naked. So Joe and I are going to practice that this week because we have been having, it's very typical, like financial stuff in our family where he is Mr. Frugal, Midwestern guy, grew up in a small town. And anyway, y'all, we're going to try it. And one of the things we're going to do is get our kids super involved. Not during our naked time. They're actually not in town. But once we sort of align on what this budget looks like with 3 teenagers, we're going to pull them in and show them like everything we spend money on. And this is all because of Tiffany and this episode that you're about to listen to. So I love her. She's become a New York Times bestseller since we launched this episode. And she has a Netflix documentary called Get Good with Money and leads an online mentorship program for women in business called mymentortiffany.com. She told us that since this episode came out, especially during the pandemic, it's increased her desire to teach financial education even more because of the effect it had on so many people. So I told you too much information, but hopefully I've just got you really excited to listen to this episode. Check out my episode with the Budgetnista, Tiffany Aliche. So this is the most fun. I want to tell everyone how we met. So Tiffany and I were both speaking at a conference called the Texas Conference for Women, which is like, I don't know, there were like 8,000 women there.
There were a
lot of ladies.
There were, yep.
A lot of ladies. There were people like Reese Witherspoon and Brene Brown and Lovey. And we were sitting at the book signing table together. Tiffany was on my right. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, there were not really too many people in my line. So I was feeling a little insecure. And then I was like, you know what? I am not going to cave in to these feelings. Like I am here in this moment. I'm going to get to know the woman next to me. And that is where it all began. Tiffany and I started chatting. I fell in love with her. And you guys, this is going to be such a gift today because we're going to talk about dollars today.
Yes.
So Tiffany, welcome to the show. Why don't you just first give everyone the 101 about who you are and what you do?
So I am Tiffany Aliche, but I'm much better known as the Budgetnista, and I teach financial education specifically to women. So you know how like Beyonce has like the Beehive?
Oh, yeah.
So my community, they've called themselves the Dream Catchers, and there are about 700,000 Dream Catchers worldwide, and we collectively work together to live our richest life.
I love it. I love it. I have to say the Queen Bee recently wore earrings from Kenya. Now they're not, I don't know if she got them from Noonday, but I'm telling you that they are the exact earrings that we carry. They're called the Maasai earrings.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, girl. So I was feeling real close to Beyonce, real close to her recently. It's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Okay. I want to know where this comes from because, you know, especially here in America, I find that money is a little bit of a sensitive topic, but you seem to be very fluid and able to teach others about it. So tell me a little bit about your growing up and where this came from.
Well, I was really fortunate in that I grew up in a household where money was talked about freely. My father was a CFO and an accountant, and he and my mom honestly made it a habit to talk to us about money. I'm one of five girls. And I can remember every Thursday we would have like, it was a family meeting, but we always talked about the state of the family's finances. And so I just got to be very comfortable with it. And it wasn't really until I got to college that I realized that so many of my friends were struggling with it. And that's when I started sharing my information and what I learned at home.
Okay, I need you to back up just a little bit because I don't know many people that have a state of money financial discussion with their family on a Thursday night. And I have three kids. Are you a mom yet?
No, not yet. We're trying though.
Okay. So you're going to be there someday. And oh God, Tiffany, we can spend the whole time talking about this, but what does that actually look like? Like, what are you talking about? Like, what are they saying? And then what are some of the practices that you had as a child and teenager around finances?
So it could be as simple as just them taking out the bills. Like I can remember specifically that every time the electric bill came out, my dad would put it on the dining room table because you have to walk by the dining room table in order to get to like the other parts of the house. So he would highlight the total, how much the bill was, and he would put the bill from the month before and the current bill. So as you walk by, it was everyone's responsibility to see, are we spending less or more? And if we spent less, and if we spent less, he'd put that money toward like a vacation. Or sometimes during the meetings, we would talk about that. Like, okay, we want to go on vacation. This is how much we have saved. Where can we go with the amount of money that we have saved? So things like that. Or if you knew that we all played a sport. So I played tennis, and so I knew that I needed like tennis gear. So it was our time to kind of bring up what we needed and how much it was going to cost and where it would come from. And so as a result, what it did was it really taught me how to speak about money without fear or shame. So once you take that away, you can find solutions to whatever your financial problems are pretty quickly. And so I am indebted to those money chats because it just set the tone for the way I live now.
That is incredible. So do you remember some of your first jobs to save for tennis?
Yeah, so I used to work at Mandy's. I don't know if you remember, like, well, now everybody goes to Forever 21, but it was like the Forever 21 before
Okay.
and then also too, I used to babysit a lot. I used to cat sit. I remember my next door neighbor had animals. I used to I had a bike with baskets on it, so I used to deliver papers. I used to work at the library. I mean,
You were working.
Yes, I was.
You were a hustler.
I was.
Okay, that's awesome. Now tell me this. Did your parents say, okay, here, like, you're going to have to pay for this? Or I'm trying to understand, when did they come in and sort of like support or give you a little grace? Or like, we're going to give you a little bit towards this, but you need to make up the rest. Like, what did those conversations look like?
So in the beginning, of course, when I was really young, they paid. So I can remember wanting like a bike for my 10th birthday, and my dad made me do the family budget. And so he just called out numbers and I added them up on his calculator and I subtracted it from what he and my mom made. And then he told me what amount that he was going to save and what amount he was going to invest. And what was left over, that was my bike budget. And so,
oh my gosh, this is blowing my mind that to have this sort of very tactical, granular conversations with your children.
Yes,
and really letting the entire family own the finances.
Mm-hmm. And then when I got to be, they really didn't look for us to like, I didn't contribute to the household, but buy anything for ourselves until we got our first job, typically about 14 or 15. Like you went to high school and got your working papers. And during the summer, I used to work and sometimes it was it was work, but really it was like education. So we would go to like computer class and they would pay you, or I was a camp counselor. And so it was my job every pay period. I had to sit down with my dad and show him how much I had deposited into the bank and how much I had spent and on what. And then we would use some of that money towards school clothes. So my mom bought our school clothes, but he wanted to teach us that, well, those school clothes that you really want. So like she's going to buy you the basics, but if you want the super cute things, you're going to have to pay for those things yourself. So if you spend all of your summer money on like cookies, cakes, and candy, which I did, then you're not going to have cute school clothes. You're just going to have the basics. So it was a really good lesson.
Were there any other basics like that, like school clothes? Did you eventually buy like your own toothpaste and stuff like that?
No, for those things, like my parents pretty much took care of those things, but it was really like the things that were above and beyond the basics, then that's going to be you once you started working. So if you wanted, I remember I wanted a pager when they first came out. My dad was like, absolutely not. I'm not paying for that. So I saved my money and I got that myself. If I wanted something that was, like I said, beyond, like five shirts, three pairs of pants, or whatever that my mom was going to buy. Or if I wanted name brand sneakers, and I definitely had to pay for that because my dad was not buying name brand sneakers. So it was just a good lesson. And when honestly it taught me, because rarely did I use my money on like those extras, because it was kind of like, well, I don't want to use my money for that. It made wearing those types of things not important to me because I wanted to spend the money on something else. And so even to this day, I don't wear name brand clothes because it just doesn't move me to spend my money on that. So instead, I rather spend my money on experience.
Okay, another question. My daughter actually right now, she's 7th grade and she has just started babysitting and she's saving up for her first phone. And I, as a parent, am like really rooting for her. And I am just everything's going into that jar.
Hmm.
Every cent that she's earning is going into that jar. But then I'm also having a little bit of a crisis. And this is something you and I talked about when we first met, is that we love generosity and we want to live generously. We want to give to others. We want to give out of an abundance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not teaching her to also give from that money. So
Mm.
how did that form in y'all's conversations as a family?
No, definitely we gave. So we donated. We went to church every Sunday, and so we had to. When we were younger, offering came from my parents. And then when we were older, although I'm not gonna lie, when I was younger, I used to sneak my little quarter out of my envelope and use it at the store until I realized that.
That is
I
awesome.
because I didn't fully understand, and it wasn't until like I think every year or every month or whatever they give you kind of like a tally of how much you gave to the church. And my dad was like, why is your balance lower than your sister's? And I didn't realize that they gave him the balances. And
Oh gosh.
I know, needless to say, I had to pay that back.
Oh, I can what a little I know of your dad. Yep. Okay.
So no, so it would definitely, well, one, my parents led by example, just like you do, in that they really gave back to their community. So I got to see it physically, like in real life.
So
Family
would they
stayed with us.
say like we are giving, like we are doing this? Because, my husband and I are doing a lot of things. My kids know, like the big one, we give actually a whole percentage of our income aside from giving to our church. We give to an organization called International Justice Mission, an
Hmm.
actual percentage of our overall take home.
Yeah.
But then there's also these like, little things that we're doing for people that just, need a little extra support. But my kids don't know we're doing that.
And they should, because one of the things so I can remember, I think it was high school, the first time that I really gave from a space of like, I get it now. So my parents are from a village that did not have its own running water. And the first year that we went, I realized that people, like kids especially, and especially girls, would have to walk to the stream, which was 2 miles away, to lug home water. And the reason why a lot of girls in countries like Nigeria, where my parents grew up, don't go to school is because they have to get water. They have to fetch water because the family needs water. And so I remember the first time I went to Nigeria, I walked with them to the stream. I pushed the wheelbarrow as far as I could. And then I was like, I can't, this is too hard. We filled it with water and we walked back. And I remember thinking, wow, you do this all day long. And so when my parents came to my sisters and I and said, we are going to actually build a freshwater well in the village. So, and then we're going to make the well live because you have to run it with energy. And we're going to allow people to pump water for free twice a week. And they can collect their water. So that way, girls don't have to go fetch water. They can, anyone can go to the pump, line up, get your water for the week, and you're good for the week. And when my parents asked us to each give $500, which is big money when you're like a teenager.
Well, yeah, that's
you know,
huge.
but it wasn't because they made it real for us. Like I got to go to Nigeria. I
Yes.
got to, so it was,
So your
I mean,
parents, were you born in America or Nigeria?
I was born in America, in New
So
Jersey.
you were born in America. So this was a trip, which, by the
Yes.
way, that was an investment
Mm-hmm.
for your parents to take. Like all of you guys, how old were you when you first went to Nigeria?
I had to be about maybe like 18, so that was an investment.
That's
Like,
huge.
and
And
there's
all of
five
you
of us.
guys went together.
Yes, two parents, five kids. So you're looking on the low end, a ticket is $1,200. On the high end, it could be upwards of 2,000.
Right.
I mean, yeah. So that was
So that's where you really lived a day in the life. Like, this is how my parents grew up. And of
yes,
course, you really internalized that. And so the
yeah.
whole family contributed and created now a well for the community that your parents grew up in.
We had like a world water organization come out to test it to make sure that it was the water was indeed fresh, because you have to dig below a certain level to make sure. Because what was happening is that I would see older people in the village whose bones were bending. And so you could see, it's almost like, like when they say you're like a cowboy, they're like bow legged, like their legs bow out.
Yes.
So I would see that and I would ask my mom, who's a nurse, what is that? She said, it's rickets. It comes from water sometimes that's not fresh. And I thought,
Yeah.
wow. And so it just really hit home, because giving became not just this kind of random arbitrary thing. It became, because a village is your family. So
Yeah.
the first time I went, so my last name is Aliche, and there's like no Aliches in America that I know other than my mom, my dad, my sisters. And so
Whoa.
we're walking in the village, and my dad's like, "Oh, this is Michael Aliche," and I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" I literally said this. My last name's Aliche, and this is Sylvia Aliche. Oh my goodness, my name's Aliche, and it took me
Oh,
a minute.
wow.
He was like, "Tiffany, like everyone in the village is Aliche," and I didn't know that.
Wow.
That's how. Well, this is how one. A village literally is your family, an extended family. And so my mother's village was neighboring. And that's how you know when you're marrying. So you don't intermarry, is that you live together as a family and then you marry maybe two villages over. But it just, so knowing that we were building this well for Aliche, for my family, and how that was going to transform their lives. And so it set the tone for the rest of my life to be a giver.
Oh my gosh. That's powerful. I don't know if you know this, but I have a son from Rwanda that we
Mm.
adopted, and I'm taking him back for the first time.
How old is he now?
He'll be 10 when we go back. It's for his
Okay.
10-year birthday. And he has been, begging, and really looking forward to it. And he's been to Africa before, because Noonday Collection, we do work in Africa. So my kids have actually been with me quite a bit on international trips and to meet our partners, our business partners. But it's going to be a whole nother trip. And, he just has just a lot more of that bent towards empathy, and like he's really good with little kids. Like there's just something in his story that I know that his legacy is going to be powerful. I mean, his story is powerful, but his legacy is going to be powerful. Gosh, it's that, so that's powerful, because you're connected to this tribe of yours. At what point, when did your parents move to America?
I'm just because, well, one, like my grandmother didn't know how to read or write, and she wanted the best for her children, and so she passed when my dad was 19, and he just knew I wanted to come to America. He's just real. My dad is really smart and a really hard worker, and so he got here, I think, in like his mid 30s, and he'd known my mom in the village. And back then, you didn't date; instead, you wrote letters. That's the
Right.
courting. So they were writing letters before he left, and he promised that I guess it was kind of like a pre-engagement that, like, one day I'm going to make it to America and I'm going to bring you, which is like saying, one day I'm going to make it to Hollywood and be a superstar. Like there's just the someone like a village boy who grew up in like the way my dad grew up with nothing. That just seems like an impossible dream. But he is someone who does not quit, who does not stop, and so he came to America, and he did indeed bring her. They both have their masters, and they had us. And it was someone's kindness. And my dad was part of a church here in New Jersey, and there was a lawyer and his wife, and they sponsored my mom on behalf of him, because he was an immigrant himself. You can't just bring someone off your word. And so, so their generosity helped to sponsor my mom, and she came just for opportunity, like the United States. So my dad always said, this is one country where, I mean, you can't lose if you work hard. Like there
Wow.
is, because there are instances in Nigeria when I go back to my village where my parents are from, you can work really hard and not succeed.
Yeah.
Not because you've done anything wrong, because there's just no opportunity.
I
There's a job for
know.
50 people and 5,000 apply. But here in the United States, if you work hard, failure is not an option if you work hard. Like you might not get every single dream, but there are dreams available to you. And so so they
Yeah.
came here.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. I just
No,
have tears in my
yeah.
eyes because that is, my business Noonday Collection. We are creating work opportunities, job opportunities for people living in communities like what your dad grew up in. And I used to be so passionate about education and that'll change the future. But then I realized, but if people don't have jobs, and that's what you see, you hear these stories about people that are just good, hardworking people, but then they don't get paid. That, they just, there's worker exploitation, or there's just a lack of jobs that actually can pay the bills. And that's what Noonday is doing. And it is such a contrast to America, where you can get some sort of job here, and the fact that you can be 10 years old and start babysitting and earn money. I mean, that's a radical concept for anyone probably outside of the West. So your dad comes here and he's like, we're gonna create opportunity and a new future for our family.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what he did. And so, it's just like I've watched them, and when I go back and someone says, "Oh, your parents put me through school, or your parents helped to build this church, or I realize like, wow, that. So to me, money is a tool that you use to help to bless other people.
Wow.
And so to your point about like your daughter, it's good to so I shouldn't have said I'm not a mom. I mean, I call myself a bonus mom because my husband has a daughter, and she's 12. And so
Okay.
with her, one of the things that we do is that she has these 3 like coffee cans. So when she earns money, she puts some in her spend jar, about 70%. She puts 10% in her give jar. And then she puts 10 to 20% in her save / invest jar. So when it's time for her to spend, she knows she can only pull from her spend jar. And the gift jar, I allow her to choose. What do you want to, are you wanting to donate to, I don't know, like an organization that helps animals? Are you wanting to give to an organization that helps kids? Whatever her heart leads her to do. But that way she understands that money is indeed a blessing. And in every blessing, there's excess, because you're supposed to enjoy, something that you've been blessed with, but you're also supposed to share that excess. And so that is the nature of a blessing. And so just teaching her that through, I mean, she doesn't love it, that she knows that all the money, like I get $100, yes, but 70 goes to spending, 20 goes to savings, 10 goes to giving. And so it's just gotten to be a habit for her, so she can understand really the flow of money in the way that, because giving activates abundance. And once people realize that, like, money is not a thing that you can look at money and realize that it's not a tool for lack. It really is a tool for abundance, and abundance for yourself and those around you.
Hey friends, I'm going to interrupt this awesome conversation for a hot second. So you guys know that I am the founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection. And at Noonday, we are passionate about entrepreneurship that changes the world. So we partner with Noonday Collection ambassadors. Ambassadors launch their own social impact businesses, they earn an income, and they make a difference for the artists and families that Noonday partners with all over the world. And I have a Noonday Collection ambassador with me right now. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So Katie is a full-time child life specialist during the day. But I guess that wasn't enough impact for her, because she also decided to launch her own business as a Noonday Collection ambassador. And Katie, I'm curious, why is it important to you to be able to do both?
Well, as a child life specialist, I get to help kids and families cope with the hospital. That looks a lot of different ways over the course of the week, but I was really missing that global impact part of it. I'd been to Thailand, I'd heard about human trafficking and really the woes of poverty, and didn't know how I was supposed to make an impact until I went to a Noonday Collection trunk show. And that's when I knew that I really needed to be part of this company to be able to make that global impact. with the time that I have and the abilities that I have.
So tell me what your ambassador business gives you that's different from your day job.
Well, I have been able to travel with Noonday. I have been able to use my income to give back to organizations that I really care about. And I've been able to really make an impact globally. When I go to these countries with Noonday, I am able to see the impact that we're making in communities. But on top of that, I've really been so encouraged and blessed by the ambassador community. And not only that, I've then been able to encourage other women to join us in this global impact. And that has just been an amazing, amazing opportunity.
Well, I, for one, am so glad that you said yes. And if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I feel so similar to what Katie is feeling and I want to be a part of this, we want you to join us. Katie and I would love to have you in our Noonday Ambassador Sisterhood. So head on over to goingscared.noondaycollection.com to see if this is a right fit for you. We would love to have you. So head on over. It's goingscared.noondaycollection.com. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us today, and back to the conversation. It has not always been a smooth financial journey for you. So I do want to get into, I know eventually you lost some money, but I also heard that you saved $40,000 on a teacher's salary. Can you tell us about that? Because that kind of blows my mind.
I know. I was sometimes I look back at myself and I think to myself, like, I was just such a strange 20-year-old. So, because like most people don't think, because like I said, it was a household that I grew up in. So
yeah, but most 20-year-olds hadn't been to Nigeria and given $500 for a well where their family still resides.
This is true. This is true. Experiences are like that are critical and
they
shaping
are.
you. So I think I just graduated college, and I decided I'd gotten like a degree in business, but I hated my internships, and I knew I wanted to live a life of service. So I decided to teach. And so I was teaching preschool in Newark, New Jersey, and I was making about $39,000 a year. And my sister and I were roommates, and I think our rent was I'm gonna say about $1,100 a month. And I bought a car like a year or so before, but I bought it in cash. And so I didn't have the car note, and plus my insurance wasn't high because I didn't owe anything on the car. It was mine in full. So I think my insurance was like $52 a month. So I started planning, and this is so important for young people when they're first starting out on their independent journey, that the way you set your finances up is either going to haunt you or help you. And so, so I was like, okay, I started with the car, saved my money, bought my car in cash. It was like $5,000. It was 2 or 3 years old. But what that meant was no car note. What that also meant was low car insurance. Okay, that's the first setup. Second setup, where am I going to live? I don't want to live with my mom and dad anymore, but at the same time, I don't want a super expensive apartment. So I got a roommate, my sister. So now instead of my rent being $1,100, my rent was $550.
Right.
And so but you see from there, you start to, so even when it came to my furniture, I said, I don't want a furniture bill. So I didn't have anything in the house until I could save to buy it. So I'm like, okay,
wow.
I want this bedroom set, until then it's air mattresses, so I could save. And also what I found is that if you went to local mom and pops, you can negotiate. Well, what if I got the floor model? What if I did so things that were maybe, I think my bedroom set maybe was going to be $1,500, and I was able to negotiate down to about $800. Because one, I was paying in cash, and two, I got the floor model, but now I don't have a bedroom set bill. And so I started to set myself up.
Do you still have that bedroom set?
My younger sister actually still has it.
Okay.
She's still, I was just looking at it the other day, like, I know this bedroom set. She's like, yeah, it's the one from when you moved out. It's like, wow.
That's
and
awesome.
But setting myself up like that. So what that meant was, I can't remember how much I was getting paid every 2 weeks, maybe like, I don't know, $2,000. Something in that range. I don't know, maybe $1,200 or whatever it was. My income my expenses were half my income because of the way I had set my life up. So I was able to save half my income in about 2.5 years. I had my full salary saved, and I was like, well, I think I should buy a house. So I bought a 2-bedroom condo. But it was
now at this point, did you have credit cards? How are you tracking your spend? Did you have an Excel sheet at the time? I know this was a while ago. How were you actually tracking?
I was super old lady. This is not like, I remember my sister finally
was like cash envelopes.
Yes, I literally was using cash.
Yeah, girl, I've been there.
I was somebody's grandma. It wasn't until my sister was like, you can do this in Excel. I'm like, show me.
But tell me more.
So literally I had an envelope, like I would get paid at work. I had an envelope, like they knew, like my coworkers were fascinated by me because I would sit down during payday and put my rent money in my rent envelope and put my, my insurance envelope and my insurance money in my insurance envelope. And so I use an envelope system. And then I had this big wall calendar where I would put down like, deposited this amount of money on this day. And at the bottom of each calendar, I would put down the total I should have in my savings account. And so it just kind of like motivated me to keep going. And so it was literally just paper and pencil and envelopes. And then I moved up, I use Excel now, but so then I moved up to Excel to make it easier. And instead of envelopes, I opened a bank account. So I have a separate bank account for bills. I have a separate bank account for spending and separate bank accounts for my savings goals. Like I have a house account and a car account. And so I still use the envelope system. It's just digitized now.
Okay. Let's talk about credit cards. Do you have a credit card? And if you do, when did you first get one?
Yeah, so I got my first credit card when I was 18 in college. My dad said, go get a credit card. Here are the rules. 1, you are not to use it except for books. If you use it for other than books, you will pay the balance in full. Because he said, I will pay your credit card. If you're in school, your job is to be a student. So as long as you use it for books and student things, I got you. So I tried to sneak. It was like, let me just swipe for McDonald's once or twice. I came home and he was like, the bill's on the table. And he said, you owe me the whole thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I never did that again.
Yeah. My dad paid for my gas in college and I would do a little grocery shopping at the gas station sometimes. That didn't go over very well.
And so that was my first card. And I still actually had that card because he was trying to build credit for me. And so I had that card. I was excellent with credit up until about 26. Then I met who I thought was a friend of mine, but he ended up being a scam artist. And I was scammed into digging myself into $35,000 worth of credit card debt.
Wow.
And so I never had credit card debt before, so I didn't even know how to deal.
So walk us through that. Walk us through that story. And thank you for being vulnerable and open about it. My husband and I have been in serious credit card debt, and it's part of our story of how we started the business and everything. But yeah, can you share a little bit more?
Sure. So he was what I thought was independently wealthy. This is when you're young, you think because people have nice things, they must have money. So, I didn't know that clearly I don't know if he was just scamming everyone he knew, but so I reached out to him and I said, hey, you're doing really well. How do you make money? He's like, oh, I invest. And I said, oh, well, can you teach me? And he said, well, the first rule of business is to use other people's money. So do you have a credit card? And I said, yes, but my limit was low, but I had excellent credit because I'd always paid off my credit card in full. Like my dad taught me every single month. And he said, okay, well, open up 2 other credit cards and pull the money out. It's called a cash advance. I didn't even know. They're like the worst because that's where you pay the highest interest. So they pull that money out and we're going to invest that money. He supposedly owned stores that we were going to buy merchandise for and put it in these stores and they were going to sell it and get our money back tenfold.
So it was a business plan that made sense.
Yes. Well, sense, but nonsensically.
Not sense.
Yes. I mean, in general, but he was like, you're going to make, what did he say? $2,100 a week for 2 years. Okay. I mean, yeah. So it was... Yeah, I was 20 something.
Yeah. Your brain was not fully developed at that point.
Yes. And I was foolish enough to not, because I was like, oh, I'm so going to surprise my dad with how smart I am. So I'm not even going to tell him. I know. So if I would have told him, he'd have like, Tiffany, this is scamming 101. But I didn't tell him. So I'm like, I'm going to make these big girl decisions on my own. And so I did that, pulled the money out. Now I have credit card debt and I waited for my first payment. And I waited and I waited. And it never came. And so in the first year, I just used to call him all the time and say, my money, I need it. I'm just paying the minimum because I refused to acknowledge that I had made the mistake and the choice. So I said, if I just pay the minimum, it's not like accepting responsibility because it's not my responsibility. This is what I told myself, which is not true. And so for a year, I did nothing but pay the minimum. And then the recession hit. And then I remember saying okay, Tiffany, if you can save $40,000, you could pay this off in a year or so. And so the moment I decided that, the recession hit and my job closed its doors and I now was
Wow.
unemployed. So I
Oh
have a
my
house,
gosh.
student loan debt, $35,000 in credit card debt.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
almost $300,000 in debt I was with no income.
Wow.
And it was like one of the darkest periods of my life. And I just remember calling my sister, asking her, what does she think I should do? And she said, well, what's the worst case scenario? And I said, well, then I lose my condo. She said, well, what would you do if you lost your condo? I said, well, I guess I'd have to move back home with mommy and daddy. And she said, well, why don't you do that now?
Wow.
And then, and I remember being like, I didn't even want to tell my dad. I told my mom. And so she said, of course you can come back. So I just started moving my things into the basement. Like my parents have like a little basement rec room that has a bedroom. So I started moving my things in. And at first my dad's like, oh, you're going to keep some things here for storage. I said something like that.
Mm-hmm.
and then one day I was there every day. And he was like, wait, what's going on? I was like, I kind of moved back home.
Did you at one point sit down with him and tell him everything?
So no, I was so ashamed to say. It wasn't until years later that he just, because of the recession, he just assumed, oh, we know Tiffany lost her job because of the recession.
But he didn't know about the debt.
No, I wrote a book though called The 1 Week Budget, where I talked about the debt and I talked about how I worked my way out and like my whole budgeting system. And before the book came out, I didn't want his friend or something to say, hey, did you read this part about Tiffany being scammed? So I gave him the book, told him to read the last chapter, and then we would sit down in about an hour. And so that's how he found out. Like, I know, years later.
What was his reaction?
He said, that was a scam, right? I'm like, yeah, I think I picked up on that.
Did he say like, babe, like, how come you didn't tell me? Or
Yes.
He did.
He was. Well, he was upset. He was, because my dad is like, he's a dad of 5 girls.
Yeah.
So woo! I know. And so he has always been so protective over us. And I could tell that he was so upset that he didn't protect me from that, that I didn't give him the opportunity, and he was like, I could tell that he was like, who is this guy? I wish I would have known. I could have protected you had I known. But I needed to learn that lesson, honestly, because up until then, I wasn't making any financial choices. I was making his choices for my life.
Wow.
And so I needed to make mistakes on my own to learn from them.
Yeah, you even got into the scam because you said you wanted to like prove how amazing you could be with money to your dad.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so, but it was a really good lesson because of that, because honestly, up until then, I was helping my friends based upon my dad's advice, but I didn't have true empathy. I was sympathetic. Where I was like, oh wow, you've got debt. Oh wow, but
right.
But in my mind, I was like, well, why'd you make that?
You're like, you fool.
I'm not gonna lie. Secretly, yes.
Yeah, I know you were.
I know, so God will really humble you when you need it.
Oh,
and so
girl.
It was like, okay, learn this lesson the hard way, Tiffany. So now I was super empathetic because I had lived through it. I ended up losing my house eventually anyway. So when people come to me, I'm like, oh yes, live through that. Credit card debt. Me too, girl. Oh, foreclosure. Check that off the box too. Moving back home with your parents. Me too. So I'm super empathetic because that was me. So I know the fear and the shame. I can feel them, and I can feel like the women that I help, my dream catchers, because that was me. So I know how you're feeling, and I know how to show you how to work your way out in a way that also includes how you're feeling and honoring how you're feeling.
Okay, so you're back at home now. Your dad is not quite sure exactly what's going on.
No.
And what happens now?
So it was then that I was like, okay, so what are you going to do with your life, Tiffany? And I did not want to go back to the classroom. Although I love the kids, the administration was too much. And I told myself, I don't want to teach anymore. I've outgrown it. I want to do something else. So I tried everything under the sun. I tried party planning. I tried everything. And I realized that every place I went, and I did a lot of volunteer work because no one was hiring, mid-recession. And so I ended up volunteering a lot. I was living off unemployment and living at home. And then what I realized as I was volunteering is that every time I volunteered somewhere, someone would somehow figure out that I was really good at budgeting, because despite the recession, despite not having a job, I still was still managing my money pretty well, considering all of the circumstances. And so someone would figure it out, and I'd end up doing a one-on-one with like the janitor or the principal or wherever I was. Like, they're like, oh, Tiffany, I heard you're really good. Can you help me? And then one day my best friend was like, you should turn that into a business. And I was like, well, one, I don't know how to run a business. And two, no one's going to pay me to sit down to do their budget. And she's like, well, you don't have any money now, so you might want to try. So I did. I told people, I charge to sit down to do your budget. And honestly, I didn't make any money in the beginning because no one had any money. And, I'd come to your house and work with you and meet your kids and meet your spouse and see that you were negative $400 when we were done. And I would think, I can't take money from a family with negative $400 a month in their bank account. And so I thought, well, how can I help people that can't pay for my help? And I started the places I volunteered for. I reached out to them and said, well, if you'll pay me, I'll go into the community and serve. And the United Way was the first one. And they said, okay. And so they sent me into the community over and over and over, and they paid me. And I was able to say, hey guys, I can teach you how to budget and save and get out of debt and fix your credit. And it's totally free. And, the United Way is paying for it. And so that was the beginning of how I structured my business of how do I offer my services to folks who can't afford it. And then, and that's where, but it's funny because the thing that will bring you there is the thing that will keep you there. And that's why when you and I met, I was struggling with getting beyond all the free that I do. Because of that initial, like the way I initially started my company. So the United Way allowed me, so I moved out of my parents' house, and a girlfriend of mine said, hey, there's a bunch of us who are like kind of post-recession or during recession, like kind of like refugees. And, we're all living in this house and it's $500 a month for a room. And I was like, okay. And so we were all in like our late 20s, early 30s, and we were each renting a room in this house. It was like 5 or 6 bedroom house. And so that was like kind of like the next place that I moved. And because I was still thinking like that same 20-year-old Tiffany who was like, well, I'm going to buy a car in cash and I'm going to get a roommate, an apartment, and a roommate for my apartment. I was still thinking like her, like, how do I keep my overhead low?
Right.
And so $500 a month, I could afford that. And so because I knew now I wanted to build this business, but I didn't want to have to worry about paying for an expensive life. And so I started using social media to teach financial education. More organizations started reaching out. My audience grew and grew and grew, and my business grew and grew and grew. And that's where it led me to today. I mean, the business does well. I definitely know that we could do even better if I get out of my own way.
Well, you're getting out of the way. You're getting out of the way.
Yes, we are,
I know. Yeah. Because, what you have to give, it is radically valuable. And I think sometimes we don't appreciate what we have. Like sometimes the things that come most naturally to us, we don't value them because we think, isn't everyone like this, or this comes so easy? And yet I think the things that we are often most passionate about, or the things that we are really good at, are the most impactful thing that we have to offer the world. And then you got to figure out how to monetize it. So when did you begin monetizing it as opposed to just having this, where community organizations are paying for you to go into the communities? How have you begun to monetize it?
Well, I started with my book. I think it was like 2011. I was like 31 then. So I started with that was the first kind of like piece of it's not free, because I felt to myself, people can't be mad about paying for a book. And so, but it took me until about 3 years ago, really, till I started monetizing beyond just the book. So I started an online school called the Live Richer Academy, where I wanted to help women take their finances to the next level. And that was like really my first like time of me going to my audience and saying, hey, this online digital thing costs money. And it's like right now it's $9.99 a month, which is way low. We're actually going to increase the price threefold in 2019. But it was 3 years ago. So that was like what, 5 or 6 years into business before I had the courage to say, Tiffany, you can charge, and not that I wasn't making any money, but it was mostly companies paying me, but I was not charging my audience because I felt, I don't know, I felt guilty. I felt bad because I kept seeing my audience as Tiffany from post-recession Tiffany.
Right.
And I forgot that if I grew, how could they not grow as well?
Yes. We're not in a recession anymore. And you are not just practicing. Like you have serious expertise now, and you are worth being paid for that expertise. And your
Yeah, so
audience needs to make that investment, because I think when we make that investment, we also are more responsible. You know, it's like the same reason that your parents made you save to buy your first bicycle, you know? And it's like when you save and then you invest in someone who's going to help you with your finances, then you treat your finances a lot more responsibly.
and that my audience actually like began to demand it. Like, they'd be like, well, Tiffany, I'd like to buy from you. What do you have? And it took them to do that. Like,
Mm.
so like the online school was because I was like, oh, we should do a free like investment club. And, they were like, well, why is it free? How are you maintaining all of this?
Right.
And I thought, wow, Tiffany,
like you're teaching us how to get out of debt. Like, are you still, so tell me, have you been able to pay off the debt?
Oh yeah, so I am 100%. My husband and I bought 2 houses this year.
Wow.
In cash. We paid off my parents' house.
You bought 2 houses in cash?
Yes, and this year, because I told you I'm a saveaholic. So
you are a saveaholic, girl. Wow.
Well, it's not all good though, because I'm trying to give it's a habit of fear about like, oh my gosh, like what if the recession happens again? I want to make sure I have enough. So I had too much.
Yeah.
And so, but I said, okay, so we have to invest this somehow. We just can't have all of this money floating. And the opportunity to purchase a foreclosure half off came up, and we wanted to move. We live in an apartment now. We wanted to move, and so it was that the house was, I think, valued about like $380 at the time, and we bought it for $180.
Wow.
So like more than doubled our money. And then the city was selling tax deeds of homes they wanted renovated, and so it's a tear down, but we were able to get a second property for $10,000, and we're gonna knock it down and put up a 2-family house, and that'll be some reoccurring income for us. And then my mom retired this year. My dad's been retired for maybe like 10 years. And I could tell that even though my dad he created a really great retirement plan, but my mom retired about 2 years early. She just could not do it ananymore. She's a nurse, and nursing is very hard.
Oh, that is, yeah.
And she just like, I just can't do it. So my dad was prepared, but not fully prepared. Because he was like, oh, I have 2 years, and we've got, my mom was, obviously working and making great money, but now they had to scramble to prepare. And I got the sense that things were tighter than they'd like,
Right.
And so I told my dad, do you have a budget? And he's like, of course, Tiffany, like who taught you? And I said, well, can you show me? Can you show me your budget? So he showed me.
Look at you.
I know. It's like it was full circle. And so then he showed me his budget, and then he showed me his take home, like my mom now make as retirees. And they were $1,000 over every month. And I said, Daddy, he said, well, I mean, and I said, no, well, like how much is the mortgage? And I think the mortgage was like $1,700 a month. I mean, not including taxes and everything, just the bare mortgage. And I said, well, how much do you owe left on the house? And they owed they bought the house, a really great price, but they had taken money, like they paid for all of our schooling. We almost all of us have our masters. So they had taken money out, for that. So they owed about $120,000. And I said, well, if I paid, do you want to stay here? Because I didn't know if they wanted to sell the house and move to maybe a condo, something smaller, because it was our childhood home. And they were like, no, we love the neighborhood. It's a beautiful area. We do want to stay here. So I asked him, well, if I pay off your mortgage, would that make you guys feel more comfortable? And he was like, yeah, but you can't pay off our mortgage. And I was like, no, Daddy, I have it.
Wow.
I could see, he couldn't believe it. He was like, I don't, because I mean, to be all the way honest, of all the sisters, I was the mess up. Like, oh, Tiffany, you didn't do your homework again. You're coming home with another note from school saying you talked too much in class. So like, I wasn't like a terrible kid, but I was a chatterbox. I hated doing my homework. I never did my chores. So I was always like that.
Wow.
Oh, if we could just, like, I was the irresponsible one, like where my sisters are like really responsible, especially the oldest. Oh my goodness. Really responsible.
Where do you fall in the 5?
I'm second
Okay.
oldest.
Okay.
And so like, it's just, yeah. So they always knew that I was smart and that I would, get out into the world and do well enough, but they didn't expect like what I'm doing now, because not Tiffany, not that she won't even make her bed, Tiffany.
You are giving me so much hope right now for my 12-year-old daughter. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, it's the ones that are a hot mess. I told my mom, right? She was like, you were a hot mess. I'm like, I was. And now look. And so
look at me now.
I could tell they couldn't believe it. And my dad is like, is this going to bankrupt you? I said, Daddy, am I not your daughter? Would I pay off your house and bankrupt my family? No. And so I don't think he believed it until, it was like the day after my birthday. And so I don't think he believed it until I called and I paid it off. And I mean, of course, my husband and I, because the way my husband and I live, we live off his income and save and invest mine. So it wasn't just a me decision. I had to, of course, ask him how he felt about it. He was like, honestly, if my mom was still alive, I would want to do this for her. And that you don't get, like when your parents, you're lucky that you have the opportunity to do this for your parents. Let's do it. And so, we did it. And I could tell my dad could not believe it. Like, he's like, well, you know what? I'm going to wait for the paper to come in the mail to say it's paid off. And I remember he called me and he was like, it's real. I'm like, yes, daddy. And like, even now to every month they call me and just say my mom and dad text me, go, I just want to say thank you so much.
Wow.
And I'm like, that, I guess every month that normally that the mortgage would be due, It hits them like, we don't have a mortgage.
Tiffany.
Yeah. But it's that full circle of being a blessing, that money is a tool for you to, yes, live your best life, but to help others in your life live their best life as well. And it's just, I just know that the more I have, the more I'm able to do. And so that's what kind of pushes me forward to not be afraid to like ask for more from my audience, because we give right back to them. I started a nonprofit to give back $1 million back to the audience by 2020. I really believe in a life of service. I don't like, I know you've heard of Mr. Rogers. Everyone's heard of Mr. Rogers. But I remember there's this PBS documentary that I watched when I was 21 and graduating college and not sure what I wanted to do. And I didn't know he was a pastor. And they did this awesome documentary. And I remember thinking to myself, I want people to feel about me the way they feel about Mr. Rogers. Everyone loved Mr. Rogers, kind, just such great energy. And I remember when they were interviewing him in his office, there was a plaque he had on the wall and it said, the purpose of life is to live a life of service. And I took that with me I'm 39 now. And I made that my mantra for life, that truly I believe the purpose of life is to live a life of service.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Going Scared podcast and our guest, Tiffany Aliche, where we talk about taking control of our financial lives. I love how she just disarms us. And so many times money is a topic that's brought with a lot of stress and brings up so many even childhood memories and traumas, or not even traumas, just how our families were about money. And we're looking to change that in our family. We want to have open conversations with our teens, and Tiffany's really helpful with this. She's also written a children's book and a New York Times bestseller, and I highly recommend it. Thanks so much for joining us on the Going Scared podcast. Next week, we're down to number 1, and I'm excited to do the big reveal. I'm Jessica Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.